So at the beginning of the movie Fargo, there's this bit of text that appears on the screen, and it says that what you're about to watch is based on a true story. See, the only problem with it telling you that is that it's completely a lie. You see, the Coen brothers, the directors of the movie, wanted to make a film that felt like it could have been real. And so to accomplish this, they added that aforementioned text to the beginning of their movie, even though every event that happens after it is completely fabricated by the filmmakers. And people wonder why it's so hard to trust today. You see, in our age of fake news and AI images, discernment could not be more important. Like, did the Pope really wear that? Did a politician really say that? Can I really make 6 figures while working 2 hours a week from home? We have had to learn to be investigators, private eyes, deducing like Sherlock to determine what is real and what is fictional. This skill set will actually serve us well as we come to the Bible, because it can be difficult to tell which stories are fictionalized history and which ones are historicized fiction. This can be a great challenge. I mean, sure, most would not argue that, say, 1st and 2nd Kings were meant to be seen as ancient historical pieces of literature. But what about something like the stories we find in Genesis? If a passage has been written creatively, is it no longer historical? The literary truth is that there's a distinction between fiction as a genre and fiction as a tool used to tell a story. You see, just like a painter, the historian chooses a subject, a vantage point, and a compositional arrangement to transfer the record of the historical events that exist inside their heads to their audience in a way that they will be able to receive it. Just as a painter uses specific brushes, colors, and techniques, the historian must utilize character, plot, structure. To drive this point home, Philip Long looks to the painting classes put on by Carl Steele. He states that Carl Steele would point out that a common mistake of beginners is to attempt to record the great mass of detail exhibited by the subject, whereas the best way to achieve a realistic representation is to be very selective, limiting the depiction of details to a suggestive few so as to allow the mind of the viewers to fill in the rest. You see, many people, especially in a modern context, may think that the perfect historian would record every detail exactly how it happened when it happened. Yet, no such chronicler exists. Instead, a historian must help their audience understand why the events have significance. As James Axtell points out, the historian helps their audience by discerning the larger patterns, structures, and meanings behind particular events and facts which contemporaries were not able to see. In fact, a simple chronicle of events wouldn't fit how we understand history, as there is no structure to create cohesion among the pieces of data being listed. Therefore, a historian will use the various functions of fiction to illustrate these greater points through historical narratives. But this still begs the question, where is the line that when crossed changes a historical narrative to a completely fictional one? Or in other words, what causes a book that sounds historical to be placed in the fiction section of the library? You see, the key difference for Long in determining this is whether the story or painting is essentially representational, historiographical, and those that are not. Historical narrative, by its own definition, is constrained to be historical. As Peter Vogt notes, historical narratives are a selective record of events. The author, editor, or redactor may have used artistry to rearrange particular moments, highlight certain details, or remove specific aspects that did occur in history, but ultimately, they're confined by the events whose story they are trying to tell. Therefore, the critic who is examining specific passages or entire biblical books in an attempt to prove whether they should be seen as historical or not must first examine whether that book or passage is trying to represent actual events. Here's an example. When discussing the story of David and Goliath, Robert Alter shows how that narrative, though it may have certain folkloric embellishments, such as David's victory over Goliath, might actually be based on firm historical facts. The author of that story provides more than just a series of events. They create for the reader dialogue. They give insights into what certain characters were feeling. They give motivations for action. And all of this is written down by a historian who could not have had documentary sources that would have given such details. Of course, while Alter would argue that details must have been imagined by the writer, How one views the work of the Spirit within the writing process will greatly affect how one understands the type of imagination these authors were using. If under divine inspiration, it would not be impossible for these ancient historians to have had knowledge beyond what they had access to. Yet, even if being under divine inspiration of God did not mean they had divine insight, the goal of bringing a representation of something that had happened still guides them in their storytelling. Could some of the details have been modified or manipulated by the author? Certainly. Would that stop it from being history? No, at least not by the way ancient historians understood history. So how do we as readers of the Bible tell when someone is trying to represent actual historical events? Well, over the next several weeks, we are going to cover how to use various literature devices to do just that. First, we're going to talk about genre, as genre by itself can define whether something is fictional or not. Next, we will look at various literary markers that the ancient authors used to embed their messages into their narratives. And to do all of this, we are going to focus on a book that has created a diverse range of discussions by its general ambiguity of how it handles history. Jonah. However, I want to be clear, there will always be tension over the historicity of any story by modern standards. Because remember, historical accuracy wasn't what these ancient authors were striving for. Sharing the truth about our world was. Even when we can be confident that the person who wrote what we were reading was trying to represent historical events, the degree to how precisely those events were shared will differ from book to book. But as we wrap up for now, I know that I spend a lot of time talking about the theoretical. There was a lot of jargon. But history is not simple. Nevertheless, if there's one point that I hope you take away from this, is that the writers of Scripture were not simple-minded, uneducated people. They were master literary artists who controlled their brushes with the same skill as any acclaimed author. Sometimes we think we are better than those who came before us. We have more knowledge, we have more understanding, and more technological advances that let us live more educated and more structured lives. But this is what C.S. Lewis called chronological snobbery. You see, the Bible is not simple, and its human creators were not dumb. Instead, God used masters of their craft to tell the greatest story the world has ever known. Thank you again for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this. Sorry, I've been sick for a little bit, which is why there's been a delay. Anyways, if this has been a blessing to you, please share this, please subscribe, please like, please do all the YouTube-y things or whatever. And anyways, I'll see you guys next time.